My name is Jane Borowski, host of Invisible Tears. This podcast will be about my story in my words, talking about my own personal experiences in self-healing. I do not claim to be a therapist, counselor, or licensed psychologist.
Hello, my name is Amanda Bedard, and I'm the co-host, producer, and editor of Invisible Tears. I'm a Reiki master, certified professional life coach, spiritual coach, wellness coach, and a counseling practitioner. Some of the content you will hear in this podcast may be disturbing to some. Viewer discretion is advised. But it is our hope by putting this information out there that we may help others to heal. We will always be a platform for truth and healing. This is Invisible Tears. On this episode of Invisible Tears, part 2 of Jane's attack, Jane continues to explain what she went through while she was in the hospital after her attack.
Now, I was in ICU for 5 days, and then I was in my regular room for another 8 days. He was super protective. I mean, I had a guard outside my door at all times, obviously because this guy wasn't found, and I also didn't realize at the time what the magnitude of all that was.
Right. So when you say guard, do you actually mean police officer?
Police
or was
officer.
it security from the...
No, police officer.
So besides Dennis,
Yeah.
you had another. You
Yeah.
had the police officers too.
Yes. And
Good.
so Dennis was like super protective. Like, he wouldn't let me see the TV. Eventually I came to, and the ventilator came out, where the nurses and I were able to talk, and they asked me if I wanted a newspaper to read, and Dennis was like, nope, no newspapers, none of that stuff. And come to find out, evidently I was splattered all over the news.
Yeah.
Newspapers, CNN, WMUR, Channel 9 News in New Hampshire. Yeah, I guess I was all over the news. And Dennis didn't want me to see it. And I'm going to back up a little bit, because I don't know how long I was in ICU at that moment. I know I still had the ventilator in, but the detectives had come to visit me.
Mm-hmm. While you were in ICU.
While I was in
talk to you.
ICU, yes. And now that I think about it, I kind of wonder if they even thought I was going to survive, because I don't know how they were going to interview me when I had the ventilator in. But it was a lot of eye blinking, 1 for yes, 2 for no. And it was at that time we actually did the composite of the guy. And it was kind of interesting the way they did it, because they had all these little slides, and they had slides of the face, and slides of the chin, and slides of the mouth, and slides of different noses and eyes and foreheads and hair, and it was just very tedious.
Mm.
And
Yeah, because you would have to go through each part of the face.
Yeah.
And they're doing this while you can't talk and you're just blinking with answers.
exactly, like they would take out the eyes, and they take the eyes out. Well, first they did the face,
Mm-hmm.
and they were like, is it a round face or a more narrow face? And blink once for a narrow face, blink twice for a round face.
It's exhausting.
And something like that. And they did it with the nose. Should the nose be wider or narrower? And the eyes, and it was it took quite a while. I can remember it took quite a while. And then that's how they got the composite. I was actually in the ICU with a ventilator in, and we're making a composite of the guy.
Wow.
So when they took the ventilator out, this is kind of funny, and this is Dennis.
Uh-oh.
He's his heart's always in the right place, but he doesn't always make the right choices. Once we had the ventilator out, I think a day or two went by, and of course I couldn't get really any visitors. It was just basically Dennis and my immediate family.
Mm-hmm.
And so Dennis had said to the doctor had come in and talked to us, and Dennis had told the doctor, there's a lot of people that want to see her.
Yeah.
When can she be moved to a regular room?
Mm-hmm.
And the doctor said, well, she needs to eat a little and drink a little, and she needs to poop. And evidently the eating and drinking passed Dennis's mind, and the poop hit it. It was like, so him and my brother were there, and I said, well, I would love something to eat and drink, because I hadn't eaten or drank anything at all.
Mm-hmm.
And so Dennis and my brother, they said, oh, we'll go downstairs and get you something to eat and drink. We'll get you something good. Anything particular you want? And I'm like, anything. I should have never said anything. They come back up with prune juice. Now, I haven't eaten or drank anything in probably 5 days. And prune juice is the last thing I really wanted to drink.
Oh my goodness. It's like, that's perfect. I would have been so pissed off. I'm like, are you kidding me right now?
But had you seen Dennis? He was so proud. He was so proud of himself. So eventually I got in my room.
Mm-hmm.
And
thanks to the prune juice.
I don't even think I drank it. I really don't.
I wouldn't have. Oh,
Like,
no.
I'll remember this, Dennis. If I have to. So anyways, got in my regular room. And that's when I was able to get visitors and stuff. And that was great, seeing other people.
Yeah.
And I can remember my mom was there one day. This was like, I was probably in my regular room maybe a day or two. And my mom was there. And I had asked her, I said, Mom, what is up with Dennis with the news and the newspaper? And she said, Jane, you're all over the news. And I said, what do you mean I'm all over the news? And she's like, you are everywhere. You're in the papers. You're on CNN. You are on all news media. And she said, the media is here at the hospital. There's like tons of trucks, media trucks, here at the hospital. And I couldn't comprehend the magnitude of why.
Right. You're like, I understand that something like this happening in such a small town and in our area is abnormal. You know what I mean? It isn't the norm. You know what I mean? By any means. But at the same time, you're like, why?
Why?
Why are they freaking out so bad? Like, why? CNN?
Yeah.
I mean, that I would be surprised too. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
I would be surprised too. I'm like,
Yeah, it was confusing to me.
yeah.
So about, I don't know, I was in my regular room for probably 2 or 3 days. And the detectives came back up to visit me and actually interviewed to find out exactly what happened that night.
Yep.
Because obviously nobody really knew exactly what happened or the whole, what had occurred.
Do you remember which detectives?
It was
these were?
Mike LeClaire, and I'm not sure who the other one was. But Mike LeClaire was, he was like the lead detective on the case at the beginning. And for some reason, I was under the assumption they were going to find him pretty quick.
Mm-hmm.
I had no reason not to believe that.
Right.
But I was 22. I was young. So when they came up, I said, "You found him?" And they're like, "No." I said, "You know who he is?" And they're like, "No." And I was like, okay, they'll find him. They'll
Right.
figure out who he is and arrest him and all that. And so I had given them in great details what happened that night, and they left. Well, they actually were like, "You sure Dennis didn't do this to you?" I was like, "I assure you, it was not Dennis.
That would have pissed me off
It
beyond
was
belief.
not Dennis. You need to investigate someplace else."
Right.
So, a nurse had brought in a newspaper. I believe it was the Recorder. Front page. I read about my attack, and my name's in the paper.
On the front page.
Front page. Now, back then, they put victims' names in the paper, whether it was domestic, violent, rape, any names were in the paper. Today, they do not do that.
I was going to say, it kind of seems like a safety concern considering they hadn't caught him yet.
Absolutely. And today, they absolutely, if you're domestic rape or any kind of violence like that, your name is never, the victim's name is never in the paper.
Yep.
The victim's name is never on the news.
Mm-hmm.
So me sitting there reading this and seeing my name, it kind of heightened my fear. I'm thinking, all right, well, this wasn't very smart on their part, but he knows my name.
Right. Public records.
Public records. He knows my name. And the police were still guarding my door. And I can remember that night I was going to sleep. And I had my first nightmare.
The night after you read the article.
Yeah.
Yep.
And, I dreamt he killed the guard and came in and got me. Because all that went through my mind was, he wants to finish me off. He wants to finish what he started, and that was to kill me.
Yep.
And knowing that I can identify him gives him more of a reason to want to kill me.
Right.
And that stuck with me for a long time. A real long time. And I also read in the paper about the Connecticut River Valley serial killer. That heightened my fear a little bit more too.
Was it separate articles, or was that the time when you actually started realizing you were being connected to the Connecticut
That
River
was
Valley
when
murders?
I believe that was the first article where they were
But
connecting
they were connecting
me
you
with the other cases.
simply because of
Yeah.
MO and sort of an attack and that sort of thing were all similar.
Exactly.
Interesting.
And I found out then that I was the only survivor.
Right.
And that stuck with me. I don't know why nobody told me that I actually had to read that in the paper. Why didn't the detectives tell me while they were there instead of me reading this in the newspaper?
Yeah. I'm wondering if they're thinking that it might have just heightened your fear.
Yeah.
But while I understand that perspective, I would think that reading it from an alternate source, not the people that were even working on your case, would have actually had more of a damaging impact. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we went through, just to back it up just a little bit. So we went through, your ICU days and days in your regular room in the hospital. So what happened with Jessica?
Jessica, I had several ultrasounds, and Jessica was perfectly fine.
That's amazing.
There was she suffered no stab wounds, and I was still very much pregnant.
Wow,
I was still very much pregnant.
I wasn't sure if Jessica had to be like emergency. You know what I mean? Like if she had to be, taken. While you were, in surgery, or I wasn't sure how that actually went.
She was fine.
She was fine, and that's amazing.
It is. She's the reason why I'm alive. I have said that from day one, and I will say it till the day I die. It was because I wanted her to live so much. It's the reason why I survived. And she wanted to live.
Mm-hmm.
And I truly believe if I was not pregnant, I would not have survived. I think she just gave me that extra strength I needed to survive.
Yep.
Without a doubt. I have no doubt in my mind about that.
I believe it too. And knowing both of you beautiful, strong women. Yeah.
She's amazing. I'm very, very lucky to have her for a daughter. I'm very lucky to have her in my life. I feel very fortunate about that.
All right. Sorry I took you off topic.
Oh, that's
and
okay.
I brought you back there. I was like, oh, wait a minute. While we're still in the realm of the hospital stays, and you know what I mean? I wanted to make sure that I asked that. So.
I remember, this was the first time I perceived that people were different around me. I can remember I was in my regular room. I was still in the hospital. And there had been like 10, maybe 15 people came to visit me all at once. And of course the nurse was like, oh, no. You have this many people in your room.
Right.
There was a big waiting room down the hallway. And so we all went down there. So that way I can visit everybody at once. And I can remember sitting in there and, people were different towards me.
How so?
So they were quiet.
Mm-hmm.
You could tell some of them didn't know what to say to me.
Yeah.
Some of them were careful with what they said to me. They were different the way they talked to me. And I'm sure I was very different too. And I often wonder, maybe it wasn't them. It was more of me and how I was perceiving the conversations with people.
True. I mean, there's two sides, right? So you most definitely could be looking at things differently and perceiving things differently. But in the same token, I'm sure that they were acting slightly different, almost like we don't really know how to act or what to say in this type of situation, because we've never been in this type of situation. We've never had, this close friend or, that's been through this. We don't know what we can say or what we should say.
And I'm sure, they read a lot of stuff in the paper and saw a lot of stuff on the news.
Yeah.
And I'm sure they didn't know how much I knew or how much I didn't know. So I'm sure it was they were protecting me. But I know the person I was that day before my attack was completely gone after my attack. I tried to not show it. I tried to hide it. But I knew I was different.
I don't think that anybody can go through a situation like that and not be changed by it.
Yeah.
If you weren't changed at all, that would probably be the abnormal. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. I do.
Yeah.
I do.
When you said that, though, that the person that you were before your attack, you knew that they were gone. You looked really sad when you said that.
Yeah.
So as if you were to describe, the person that you were before the attack, would you say, I could sort of think about a couple of like descriptors, like personality descriptors and things like that. I'm sure were you like sort of like a happy-go-lucky, adventurous?
I was happy-go-lucky.
Yeah.
I was very, I don't want to say I was like a flower child or whatever. Life never had a plan. And I did whatever that moment required me to do.
You were spontaneous.
I was very spontaneous. And I trusted. I trusted everybody. I never, ever, ever, ever felt fear. I always was just trusting.
Mm-hmm.
I was unpredictable.
I can still see that.
I was very unpredictable. And I was happy. I was happy with who I was. I always was like, you either like me or you don't like me. Mm-hmm. This is who I am. This is this is the package. You take it or you leave it.
Exactly. This is what you get.
But after my attack, I worried about how people perceived me.
And that's sort of understandable given what a spotlight was shown on you. And it was so abrupt and so confusing. And not only that, you were shielded from so much of it at the beginning. It was almost like you were constantly being shocked by things.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
While obviously, having embedded in your personality, I really don't care what people think of me, and I'm and I am who I am, and I'm still, and I'm spontaneous. I can still see that in your personality, just to give you feedback.
Yeah.
But it's totally understandable and I would think totally and absolutely normal to then all of a sudden have this, because you were just plastered across everywhere. Media, newspapers, everywhere. You can't help but have those thoughts and those notions sort of come into your head because you are everywhere. It's almost like it's so overwhelming.
It was very overwhelming.
Nothing that you've experienced before.
No.
So you are all of a sudden going to have to, deal with this emotion and deal with this, oh God, Oh, I'm going to be, I'm on the news again. Oh, what are they saying in that paper? Oh, it's stressful.
Mm-hmm.
It's stressful and it's super, super overwhelming.
It was. It was almost like an invasion of my privacy.
Absolutely.
And like every time I read the paper, I was like, "Oh, they're so wrong there," and "Oh, that's misinformation." And I was, I would almost like analyze their articles all the time because it's like, that's me. You don't know me. You never interviewed me, but yet you're saying this in there. It's like,
exactly. But yet you're writing about me.
yeah.
Why don't you come talk to me?
I didn't want them to talk to me.
Good point.
They had come to the hospital a few times, and the guard at my door, he would come in and say, like, Keen Reformer is here, or Keen Sentinel is here. They want to interview you, and I'd be like, no, or CNN, not CNN, WMUR wanted to come in and interview me, and I said no. I said no. But and then it's funny because the day that I was getting out of the hospital, I was being released. All of a sudden, all the news media is gone. They're not out in front of the hospital anymore. I looked out my window. I don't see any trucks. I don't see any of those satellites or anything. And I'm like, so the nurse walked in, and I said, the media is gone. Nobody's out there. And she's like, oh, yeah, we knew you were getting discharged today, so we told the media you get discharged yesterday. It's like, that was brilliant. Brilliant. She's like, yeah, because we wanted you to be able to go home and not be followed or whatever, and being, approached by the media as you were while you were leaving the hospital. So, yeah.
That was nice of them to do.
That was very nice of them to do. Because I can't. I know people that came in to visit me, they were like, oh, my God, the media is in front of the hospital. We had to walk through them. Do you know Jane? And constantly asking questions about me. And so I can't imagine what the staff had gone through with all that. That must have been pretty difficult for them. And I thought about that, too, when I was in the hospital. It's like, they have to walk through that all the time.
Right.
And they obviously they couldn't ask, answer questions about me or whatever. But that must have been a lot for them.
It must have been, but I think, especially case in point with what they did with, when you were on the day you were going home and how they made it so you could go home free. I'm sure, yes, it must have been, annoying for them and must have been a little bit challenging for them, but I'm sure that it made them sort of appreciate your privacy and seeing how, just sort of sounds like they were relentless, and they're seeing it from the perspective of, this woman is lucky to be alive. And so why don't you just leave her alone? You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yep. But before I was released, the detectives came up to the hospital to see me again. Now, this is almost 2 weeks after my attack. And they come up, and of course I'm like, so you found him. I still had no reason to think they weren't going to find him.
Right. And
they said, no, but, oh, by the way, we want to let you know Dennis is no longer a suspect. I was like, okay, I get it. They have to investigate the closest person to you. But when the survivor is telling you it was not your significant other,
right,
believe them sometimes, especially in this situation.
Right.
So, yeah, I guess they fully investigated him. He had to go to the police department and be interviewed, and they interviewed people that he was with that night, because he come to find out he was at the fair that night. But to just hear them say, "Oh, by the way, Dennis is no longer a suspect," that bugged me. And it still bugs me that they did that.
Yeah.
Because I feel almost like they took away from the investigation
Exactly.
that they should have been doing and focused on him.
Exactly.
I don't know.
It's almost like if you had just taken what I said
Exactly.
and believed me and not put any additional focus on him. I mean, still technically do what you have to do to clear, I mean, whatever, to, cover your ass. But I'm telling you, it wasn't him. I'm telling you, I'm doing the whole blinking thing with the composite and doing, and I'm telling you repeatedly, it's not him. And he's in here every day, you know what I mean, by my side. And I'm telling you, it's not him. Stop focusing on him and focus your energy to actually finding the person that did this.
Exactly. That's the way I felt. That's exactly the way I felt. So when the detectives were there, I said, well, I'm going to be released. I think I was being released the next day. And I said, is this guy at the door coming with me? Meaning the guard. How do I go home? Am I going to have some kind of security? Am I going to have, somebody there? Seems how you haven't found him yet.
Exactly.
And unfortunately, no. It doesn't work that way. I do not get a guard at my house.
What did they say? Was it did they give you some sort of BS thing, like it's limited resources or something like that? Or
I don't remember really.
It's been no threat, recent threat or something?
Honestly, I don't remember.
Yeah.
But they said that the town police will be doing drive-bys by my house.
Mm-hmm.
So that made me feel a little bit more comfortable. The fear was still there. And when I got home, I was never alone. Never, ever, ever alone. Somebody had to be with me all the time. And if I went somewhere, I had to be with somebody. If anything, I wasn't driving for about a month anyways because I was still healing from my tendon in my leg and my knee. But I always had to have somebody with me.
Yep.
And I was scared. I was very scared. I went outside a few times by myself, but I just felt as if what if he's watching me?
Right.
And then one day, again, Dennis protecting me. One day, where Dennis's house was, right next door was the family farm. So one day I decided to take a walk over next door. And there was my car sitting there. And there was this guy cleaning it. Mm-hmm. And the next thing I know, Dennis is behind me. He's like, hey, come here. Let's walk this way. And I'm like, no, I want to see my car.
Mm-hmm.
And they had just gotten done processing my car for evidence.
Yep. And
they brought it over to the farm, and they had the insurance company had somebody come and clean it because I guess there was obviously a lot of blood in it.
Yep.
And they dusted for fingerprints all over the place. So, there was a lot of that. The guy was just finishing up cleaning my car, and I told Dennis, I want to go over and see my car. Mm-hmm. So, of course, he had to go over first to see how much they had cleaned. And then I went over, and the guy just finished up. It was all cleaned and everything, and my stuffed animals are gone. They took my stuffed animals, and they fixed the windshield, and so the car was all ready to go. It was ready to be drivable again.
Where'd the stuffed animals go?
I had evidence.
Evidence. Oh, okay.
For whatever reason, I don't know,
Hmm.
but they were gone.
So I remember you saying that you were excited that those were for Jessica.
I
when you were
was.
putting them.
I was.
Yeah.
I was.
Interesting. I was just wondering if maybe they were, ruined by, you know what I mean, and maybe had to be disposed of. But
They pretty much, well, no, not pretty much. They took everything out of my car. Everything that was in my car, they took out of my car for evidence. And they, and to back up too, while they were up at the hospital, while I was in ICU, the first time the detectives came, they did scrape my fingernails because I had a lot of, they believe I may have scratched him.
Yep.
And so they scraped underneath my fingernails and kept that for evidence. But as far as everything in the car, they kept everything. They kept the windshield, my sneakers, because my sneaker is what kicked the windshield out.
Yep.
And everything else that was in the car. The sodas, stuffed animals. I eventually got my pocketbook back. They had actually gone through my pocketbook, but so I went over the car, and I was real quiet. I'm looking at it, and Dennis wanted to sell it. And I said, "No, that's my car. I loved my car.
Right.
I don't want to sell it." I said, "I'm fine with it. I really am." And I ended up keeping the car for another 5 years, something like that. But he did not want me to have that car anymore, and I understand why. I totally get it. He just didn't want, he didn't want me to be seen driving it,
He probably didn't want you to have any triggers either.
Yeah, I'm
a
sure.
lot of times objects or scenes or areas, things like that can actually trigger back traumatic situations and events for people.
Yeah, that is very true. But being back home was hard for quite a while. And I didn't realize, it was a few months, probably just before I had Jessica, where I realized that I healed completely physically.
Right.
But I always knew something mentally was different.
Right.
Didn't know what it was, but I knew it was different. I knew I was different. I was very angry. I didn't always show it, but I was very angry that this happened to me.
Understandably so.
And, it wasn't until I had Jessica that is when I realized how angry I really was. After I got home, I ended up moving back in with Dennis's parents and Dennis. And it was probably a week after I got home, the detectives had come and visited me.
Yep.
And they asked if I could go for a ride with them. They wanted to go over to Gamarlo's, and that way I could show them exactly what happened, where I was parked. They pretty much knew where I was attacked, and because I guess there was a big blood stain there, and
Yeah, I was going to say.
I guess they actually had somebody come in and spray that down. I don't know if it was Gamarlo's store or the police, but so we went over to Gamarlo's, and I was explaining to them exactly where I was parked, where he was parked, and got really detailed about a lot of stuff. And that's when they had asked me if I would be willing to go and be hypnotized.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was driving behind him, they wanted to see if I could identify the license plate.
Yeah, absolutely.
For whatever reason, I didn't that night, and that's one thing that has changed in my life. If I see something abnormal or something weird or something that doesn't seem right, I'm jotting license plate numbers down all the time.
Yep. It's not a bad idea.
I know, but I
What
wish
does
I
it
did
hurt?
it that night.
I know.
You know,
I know.
I wish I did it that night. But I was 22. I was young.
Yeah, you were.
And I was even kind of naive. I never knew there was serial killers in the state of New Hampshire. I mean,
Right?
I had no reason to even know that.
Who thinks about that at 22?
Who does?
In a small town, in small towns,
Yeah.
like around here.
So, I just never thought of doing any, I never thought, oh my God, I'm behind him. I got to get his license plate number.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, to be honest with you, Jane, with how much blood you probably already lost, it was a miracle that you were even driving and operating your car.
That's true.
So don't you dare be hard on yourself for not getting a license plate or being. You were lucky to be conscious, my dear.
I know.
You were.
I was very lucky to be able to go get help for myself.
Yeah, you really were. So interesting. So the detectives were the ones that actually referred you up to
John Philpin.
John Philpin.
Yes. He was up in Springfield, Vermont. And so I went up there, met with him. Very nice man. He hypnotized me. I was very much hypnotized because I don't remember anything.
Usually the way it works.
And I talked to John a little bit, about different things, and he asked me a few questions before I was hypnotized, and then the detectives brought me home, and about a week later they said, we have to hypnotize you again. I'm like, why? And they're like, we got no audio.
Oh, no. Technical difficulties. No.
They had a camera on me,
Mm-hmm.
and they had
No audio.
audio recording
That
on me.
sucks.
I had a little mic on me,
Mm-hmm.
but for some reason the audio didn't work that day. So I went back up and met with John, and I was hypnotized again. That time I remembered everything. I remember talking to him and him walking me through everything, and I did get a partial plate. Wasn't able to get the state, but I was able to get a partial plate, which was like 336 or 366 or something like that. We'll have to relook that up, and
Yeah, we can look that up.
yeah. So then I hadn't heard from anybody in a while. I had Jessica. And then I was reading a lot in the papers about, the articles kept coming up about the serial killer, Connecticut River Valley serial killer. And I had the names of the victims that didn't survive in the articles. And there was quite a few the next 6 months after my attack and after I had Jessica. And I was just like getting really overwhelmed by it.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to know more.
Yep.
I wanted to know what happened and what happened to these women. And I wanted to know more. So I called John up and I said, John, you said anytime I wanted to talk, you'd be available. I want to talk. So he met me in Keene. We had lunch. And I said, I want to know more.
Yep.
I want to know about these women. I want to know what happened to them. And unfortunately, he gave me some reports on each one of the cases. But most of the info was Sharpied out, Sharpied
was
out.
redacted. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. For confidentiality.
And and he said, I'm sorry, you're probably not going to get much from these, but this is the best I can do for you.
Right.
I can't give you a whole lot of information because all the cases were active investigations. They were all still open and unsolved. And so, I took them home. I've read what I could. It was very confusing. But it was surreal. It was like reality slapped me in the face that, oh my God, I was attacked by a serial killer. And I survived.
And not only that, you and your daughter survived.
Exactly. Yeah. I was 7 months pregnant. Attacked, stabbed 27 times by a serial killer. And I survived.
And you're here today.
And I'm here today.
Thank you all so much for listening to this episode of Invisible Tears. Make sure you subscribe to our podcast, hear all future episodes. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram. We also have a website, invisible-tears.com, where you can keep current with any events that may be happening with our podcast, read more about Jane and the team, and read more about all the Connecticut River Valley unsolved cases.
If you are looking for everyday items, clothes, collectibles, or a gift for that special someone, you can support us further by checking out our retail store, The Frugal Marketplace. We can be found at thefrugalmarketplace.com or search for us on eBay and Poshmark. We hold an online claim sale on Facebook Live every Monday night at 7 p.m. where you can find our latest items for sales or items at a deep discount. If you're local to the area, please stop in and say hi. You can find us at 919 West Swanzey Road in Swanzey, New Hampshire. The links for our products can be found in our show notes.
If you want to learn more about my wellness practice, Guided Path Wellness, head to guidedpathwellness.org. There you can read more about me and my certifications, more about the Reiki and coaching services I offer both in person and remote, and read all about my products for sale that I make through the practice. Feel free to utilize the Contact Us section on the website with any questions, or utilize that free 15-minute consultation booking button if you have any questions about what might work for you. Evil may exist in this world, but we will not let it win. See you next episode.